So we start with the Śvetāśvatara, the white horse Upanishad. And scholars who read this historically, as we know, the Vedantins consider these to be eternal texts, so they don't see any internal chronology. They don't see any sequencing in not just within the Upanishads, but also the entire Vedic corpus. They're all divine revelations, they're eternal. Whether they're literally eternal, as with the Mimamsa school, or whether Ishvara articulates them at the beginning of each cosmic cycle, nonetheless, they're eternal texts. So the idea of internal chronology is an alien notion to a traditional Vedantin. But a academic scholar sees them as human constructs, human products, and therefore they were written over a number of centuries. And one reason for that being, the language. Brihad has more archaic language and so forth. So from that lens, from the point of view of a sort of historical academic lens, the Shveta, I'm going to call it the Shveta, but it's the Śvetāśvatara Upanishad, is a later Upanishad. And scholars see it as, along with the Gita, representing the emergence of theism in a dominant sort of way on the Indian subcontinent, from an earlier Vedic, more Indo-European background of Vedic rituals, celestial beings, the celestials, rituals being performed to sort of satisfy the celestials. This earlier Vedic backdrop, which had its earlier backdrop in the joint Indo-European period, about which we don't know where. So much scholarship was invested in that in the late 19th, 20th century. What was the homeland of these proto? Then they were called Aryans at that point. And of course, that became completely embroiled with politics and nationalism and took a very, very ugly turn. But from that point of view, then in this early Indo-European period, of which the Vedic texts are the closest, complete sort of literature to that period, represents a period when there were the mainstream religion was religiosity to the gods, and attempting to placate the gods and please the gods. And then they would see the Upanishads then as historically later. And then even within the Upanishads, they would see a chronology from the earlier Brihad, the Brihadaranyaka, and then the emergence of theism, which of course then sweeps over the entire Indian subcontinent, essentially takes over religiosity from that point on. And especially as expressed in the Puranas, the 18 great Puranas, the Bhagavata, which I work with, but the Shiva, the Vishnu, the Linga, the Skanda, and the 18 great Puranas. So the Shveta then represents this earliest stage from that point of view. Okay, remember there's traditional point of view and an academic, and you can decide which way you want to go with that. My job is just to share the two different ways that these texts have been processed. The sort of modern post-Enlightenment Western way, where scripture is no longer just accepted as divine revelation, but it's subject to critical, analytical, subject to reason. So reason becomes paramount. That's one way of thinking of the Enlightenment. The scripture gets displaced, not jettisoned, not thrown out, but subject to reason. That's one way of thinking of what the Enlightenment was. And so therefore Christians were doing that to their Bible. So there's no way they were not going to be doing that to the religious scriptures of other countries, which they then went on to colonize. All the more reason to sort of subject to kind of demote the sacred texts of other cultures. If you're going to colonize them and missionize them and send missionaries, and naturally you need to you need to find flaws, you need to find reason, you need to tell yourself a story as to why your political system and your religious system is superior to that of the natives. Right? That's the core of missionizing and of colonialization. Okay. So anyway, we are going to put on the lens of traditionalists because we're yogis, and at least in our course, in our Svadhyaya, we've engaged a pretty traditional. We just sort of looked at we're sieving through the text for jnana, for knowledge of the Ātman. We're looking at these texts. We have been in the Svadhyaya, and that's my pedagogy in general, that my teaching in general, that's my methodology, that I let the text speak for itself. But every so often we make historical comments if they might be of interest. We say something like, well, academics will read it this way, but tradition will read it this other way. So the Shveta then, very theistic. And it's also, lots of obscure passages. If you have the book, go look in the footnotes and see how many times Olivel says, this passage is corrupt. I have read this word instead of reading it this way, I've read it some other, I've added a syllable, or I've made it into some other word, because otherwise there's no way to construe sense from it. He calls it chaotic in the introduction. And he thinks it's it's bringing in all these different, proto-Sankhya, proto-yoga. We find perhaps the earliest expression of yoga. And he feels it's a text that's sort of doing a lot, and trying to sort of maintain fidelity to the old Vedic ways, but bringing in these new Sankhya metaphysics and yoga practice and theism in a major way, and doesn't all quite fit perfectly together, according to Olivel, the author. So he's a critic, he's an academic scholar, and that's what I was talking about before. Okay, so let's read it. And I'll do my best to hang in there for 2 hours. As you know, I'm still recovering, but I love this opening verse. People who make inquiries, and by the way, so that means that I'm not going to have an explanation for every verse, because there isn't one. There isn't an explanation. Some of them are obscure. Of course, we could always read it through the lens of Shankara. But then, then we're reading it through a lens of somebody, 1,500 years later. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Shankara certainly is closer to the tradition than we are, and deeply embedded in it. But there are verses that I'm just going to say something like, well, this could be read this way, this could be read some other way, or I'm just going to say, let's skip this because we can't read the whole text. But let's look at the verses that are likely to be most interest to us. And how about this for a wonderful start? What is the cause of Brahman? Right? First verse of Brahman of the Vedanta Sutra is Brahman, second sutra, is Brahman is the cause of everything else. So that'd be like saying, okay, if God made everything, well, who made God? So a nice way to start an Upanishad. But we're going to see, just like Krishna says in the Gita, this text is going to say, Brahman is supported by Shiva, by a personal being. That somehow or other, Brahman in the sense of the Ātman, in the sense of the sort of Brahman as the world and Brahman as the Ātman, they're secondary. There's a triad here. There's three entities. Shiva, well, the word Shiva doesn't come actually. It's Rudra and Hara. And later tradition will say, how do we know that's the Shiva? Because in later times, Rudra and Hara are synonyms of Shiva. So naturally, some scholars are going to say, well, how do we know it was really Shiva? Maybe Rudra and Hara meant something else in those days. And that's what scholars do sometimes. But they're clearly the name Rudra and Hara. So for the most part, this is acknowledged as being a Shaivite Upanishad. For me, it's obvious, it's clear, and it's a bit silly trying to quibble about that. But let's go. So what is the cause of Brahman, right? Look at that opening statement. The whole Upanishads have been about establishing Brahman as the ultimate cause of everything. So you start off saying, what is the cause of Brahman, which is supposed to be the cause of everything? Well, maybe there's a higher entity. Maybe there's a personal God. And that's certainly the position that the Shveta would take. And then we have these lovely existential questions that most thinking beings at some point in their life ask. Why were we born? By what do we live? What is life? And what are we established? Governed by whom, O you who know Brahman, do we live in pleasure and pain, each in our respective situation? What governs our karma, our respective situations, our particular embodiments and the rest of it? And look at this lovely verse here. Should we regard it as time? Is time the ultimate cause? In other words, just movement itself? A kind of a big bang idea? There's just this mysterious bang, and from that point onwards, there's movement that we call forces and particles. Is it just that? That is the ultimate cause? Is it inherent nature, just the nature of matter, that it just comes together? That would be even a modern materialist point of view. We don't need to posit God. We don't need to posit souls as distinct entities. And eventually science will account for everything by just matter. Right? We got rid of the old gods, right? We don't believe there's gods lurking about behind the clouds making it rain. We got rid of that. We have, meteorology and weather forecasting. We got rid of witches and spells as the cause of disease. Okay, we have modern medicine. So we got rid of all these old superstitions, and God and the soul are next on the list. This idea that there's a ghost in the machine, that there's this other entity. Science will eventually find some neuron or combination of neurons or some kind of material substructure to consciousness. Anyway, is it inherent nature? Is it as necessity? Is it chance, just fate, providence? Is it the elements? These all overlap. Just material entities as the source of birth, or as the person? Or is it a combination? But that can't be, because there's the Ātman. Even the self is not in control, because it itself is subject to pleasure and pain. So how can we be the ultimate truth? So in a sense, this kind of goes a little bit against the Advaita position, that the Ātman itself is maybe not in its limited, conditioned ignorant state, but how can we be ultimately God? Because we're subject to these things beyond our control, pleasure and pain. So then who's controlling pleasure and pain? It can't be us. Because what fool would choose pain, but we're subject to pain? Or you could say karma. Well, then who's controlling karma? So this is an important verse. For anyone who likes to think that they are God, then you have to ask the very simple question, well, how come you're suffering then? What kind of a God is that? But you say it's illusion. Well, what's this illusion then that covers God? You've just reflected the problem one stage further back. You want to say, oh, I'm God, I'm just an illusion right now. When I lift my illusion, then I'll realize I'm God, I am Brahman, I am the ultimate truth. Well, how come you're an illusion then? So these are the sort of questions that anyone here. Look, this text is saying even the self is not in control because it's subject to pleasure and pain. Very important point. Those who follow the discipline of meditation have seen God. Okay, just like Drashtu Sarupe, just Patanjali says, you can see they've seen God and the self and the power. That's Prakriti. The three things. This text is going to talk about three things, often using slightly confusing language, often using synonyms that are not helpful. I mean, from our point of view, but there's a triad. So they're God, the self, and the power. This is very close to Ramanuja's philosophy. He's a Vaishnava philosopher, but he would say there's God, the world, and the souls. Actually, that's kind of Christian and Abrahamic. So this text is coming in that line. Even though Advaita will have its way of interpreting things, it's definitely theistic. One alone is he who governs all those causes, from time to self, all of this time, all the way down to self. That list up there, time, inherent nature, necessity, one alone is he who governs all those causes from time to self. How much more monotheistic do you want than that? Right at the start. And we don't have to worry about all this. If you're interested in all this, check the footnotes, right? A wheel that is one-rimmed and three-folded, the three gunas, the 16 tips, those are, you can look in Olivelle, probably the 16 subtle ingredients of a subtle body, the 50 spokes, those are We were just reading it the other day in the Sankhya-Karika, the various bhavas, the 6 sets of 8, 8 cities, 8. I forget them all. They're all in the footnote if you're interested, and you can the 3 different paths, jnana, bhakti, karma, right? Delusion regarding the one springs from the 2 causes, right? They're coming together, the seer and the seen. So all of this is basically kind of early Sankhya. The 5 sense organs, the 5 pranas, 5 types of perception. Okay, we won't worry about that, because nothing particularly interesting, and you can read the footnote. Within this vast wheel of Brahman, and I forgot my invocation, so if you don't mind, I'll just say it now. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshorun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Tinamini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Akanda Mandala Karam Yena Vyaptam Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Apavitra Pavitro Va Sarvavastha Piva Ya Smaret Pundarikaksham Sa Bhaya Vyantara Shuchi. If we don't take shelter of Bhagavan and our teachers, and then we just take shelter of our ego, my friends. We don't want that. Who wants ego? Who wants their own ego? What speaks somebody else's ego? Within this vast wheel of Brahman, which all subsists, which abides in all, right? Sort of underpins everything. A goose, and that's a term for the Hamsa, the Ātman. There is in sometimes it's called a Paramahamsa, the great Hamsa, the great goose. And in one commentary in the Bhagavatam, or somewhere in the Bhagavatam, the text that I work with, it says why a goose? Really, it's a swan. I know that he says goose. It's a swan, a Hamsa, and an ancient word. And believe it or not, Lufthansa, German Airlines, Luft is air, Hamsa, swan of the air. That Hamsa is cognate with this Hamsa, and it's almost unchanged. And it's survived over millennia, and it's still survived in German, because words. I mean, many words survive, but normally they change a little bit. That one didn't change at all between proto. So if you find it in Sanskrit and you find it in Germanic, you can be pretty sure it's an original Indo-European word. You have to reconstruct what the originals are if the daughter words are very different. So then you have to say, okay, which one is closest to the original, and historical linguists has its rules of reconstructing the original vernacular. And of course, it's highly speculative because you can never check it, because there's no evidence of that original language. There isn't any documents or inscriptions. But if you find a word that's very, very, very similar, or in this case, identical, between the language as distinct, as different spatially and chronologically as Hamsa, then you can be pretty sure the Indo-European would have been something very close to Hamsa. So this Hamsa, and the text I work with say, why a swan? Because I don't know if it's true or not, but the swan, according to this point of view, has the ability to separate. If you mix milk and water, can suck out I can't remember if you suck out the milk and leave the water, or suck out the water and leave the milk. Probably suck out the milk. I don't know if it's true, but that's the claim, and therefore, therefore the term is, like the enlightened one can sort of suck out the Ātman from its embodiment in the Prakriti. So that's the sort of metaphor. But within this goose keeps moving around. When he perceives himself Ātman, as distinct from the impeller, my friends, this is dualism. God is distinct. This is not a monistic Upanishad. When he perceives that his Ātman is distinct from the impeller, right, the prime mover, as Aristotle would call it, God, delighted by that knowledge, he goes from there to immortality. So here now, it's not just a matter of perceiving the Ātman. See the difference? As most Jnana traditions are about perceiving the Ātman, this is about perceiving the Ātman as distinct from God, which means knowing God and knowing that God is a distinct being. Here, the highest Brahma, highest, not lowest. Shankara has a problem with this because Shankara would say Brahman is the highest and the lowest, the lower. The lower is illusory, conventional, the world we see, with the creation we see, which has a creator, which has Ishvara, all this talk of Ishvara and creation, that all sort of holds good for lower Brahman. But higher Brahman is all of that. You realize all of that is an illusion. The creation is an illusion, therefore creator is an illusion. God, Ishvara, is an illusion. And there's only impersonal, all-pervading Brahman, no individualized Ātman. That's not what this is saying. It's saying this highest Brahman has been extolled thus as a triad. That's not illusory. That's the nature of the highest Brahman. What is it? Oneself, the foundation, and the imperishable. And again, these are terms for the Ātman, God, and Prakriti. Sorry, the Ātman, Prakriti, and God. And you'll see that, we'll see. So this is what I mean by the language can sometimes, for us, maybe at the time it was delivered, these terms were, obviously better, more in circulation. When those who know Brahman have come to know the distinction between them, the distinction between the Ātman and God. How can we be God? We're subject to ignorance. Just think of it. Just think it's so simple. It's so obvious. We might be a spark of God. We might be supported by God. We might somehow be a part of God, but not God in the entirety. And certainly this Upanishad takes that position. So when those who know Brahman have come to know the distinction between these two, they become absorbed in and totally intent on Brahman and are freed from reincarnation. The womb being rebirth. This whole world is the perishable and the imperishable. So there's your Prakriti Purusha, your, you could say the Sat and the Asat, the manifest and the unmanifest, the Vyakta and the Avyakta, joined together, and the Lord bears it. The Lord is a third that bears both the perishable and imperishable. And how about this then? If you want it, can it be more clear than this? Well, the Ātman, who is not the Lord. You want anything more clear than that? In terms of identifying this Upanishad anyway, that doesn't apply necessarily to all the Upanishads. The Chandogya is very monistic. If you're looking for monism, then Chandogya is the place to go, not the Shveta. You remember the Chandogya, the rivers merging in the sea and then no longer rivers? Well, that's as monistic as you can get. So that works well for an Advaita metaphysics. I'm not saying, I'm only talking about this Upanishad. This is a theistic in the sense that God is distinct. Want to call that dualistic, call it dualistic. With the self who is not the God remains bound. Why? Because he's the enjoyer. We're trying to in Boga. What does Patanjali say? Boga Pavarga. Why is we're running around chasing ragas and dveshas. We're in avidya. So we're looking for enjoyment. But when he comes to know God, he is freed from all fetters. See, now what is the qualification? It's bhakti. Bhakti is not about knowing the Ātman. It is knowing the Ātman. Of course it is. Jnana yoga underpins all the yoga, but bhakti is much more about knowing God, and then God will free us. So when he comes to know God, he is freed from all fetters, the bonds of karma. Right, there are two unborn males, the one who knows and the other ignorant. The one is the Lord and the other is not the Lord. There is one unborn female, that would be Prakriti, who is joined to the enjoyer and the objects of enjoyment. Right, so the soul trying to enjoy Prakriti. Prakriti is a feminine noun, so that's the female. And then there is the Ātman, limitless and displaying every form. We can take any kind of birth, every form. There's 8,400,000 species of life according to these traditions. Not engaging in any activity, right? We know ultimately the Ātman is just pure consciousness. when someone finds these three, again, this idea of three, right? Previously it was, there's a triad. So there's a triad in it. Look, 7, triad, 3, God, soul, world. So when someone finds these three, he finds this Brahman. The primal source is perishable. While Hara, there he is, Lord Shiva. Later tradition, Hari is Krishna and Vishnu. Let's not get those confused. So Hari is Krishna and Hara, always Shiva. Great Lord Shiva. Ishvara is immortal and imperishable. The one God, monotheism, rules over both the perishable, that's the ever-changing property, and the Ātman. By meditating on him, with bhakti. Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. So this Upanishad does for Shaivism what the Gita does for Vaishnavism. And scholars date them pretty much at more or less the same time. So this would be, this is the Shaiva Purana. And it's very interesting because the Vaishnavas they try to hijack it and say it's all really Vishnu. That's sectarianism for you. Madhva says all of these names are just qualities of Vishnu. They're not actually. But anyway, by meditating on him, by striving towards him, and further in the end, by becoming the same reality as him, that doesn't mean you merge into, it just means that God is a conscious being, consciousness. Even Patanjali says Purusha Vishesha for Ishvara. I mean, what is God ontologically? I mean, there's only consciousness and matter. So if God isn't matter, a material thing, then he's a conscious being then. So that's the same reality as the Ātman. The difference is one is the Lord, one is not. So the same reality, and by becoming the same reality, realizing our nature as Ātman and our relationship with Bhagavan, then all illusion disappears. So this is more focused on bhakti than jnana. Jnana is there, but the stronger element of bhakti. When one has known God, all the fetters fall off, all karma, fetters, right? Action, reaction. You act and then you're fettered to the result. Once you act, if you act in avijja, of course there's aklishta action, but klishta from the kleshas, the minute we act like that, then there's a fetter, there's a bond. By eradication of the blemishes, the doshas, the kleshas, I think the word is kleshas actually. By the eradication of the kleshas, birth and death come to an end. By meditating on him, one obtains at the dissolution of the body a third sovereignty over all, and in the absolute one's desires are fulfilled. We become liberated, but not God. But still all I guess, okay, what does this mean? All desires. At this point, it wouldn't be material desires. It would mean desires for freedom of suffering, those kinds of desires, realization of the sense. This can be known, for it abides always within one's body, the Ātman. Higher than that, there's nothing to be known. So sometimes you get this confusing language. This is the nature of the Upanishads. That's why the Vedanta Sutras are written. So what does this mean? This can be known for it abides within one's body. Is it the Ātman, or is it God also abides in the body? Like Ramanuja would say. Ramanuja, the Vaishnava, would say there's your Ātman and there's God. Just like Christians say that you have a guardian angel there, right? So Ramanuja, the great Vaishnava theologian that I always keep mentioning because I feel you need to know about Ramanuja, if you hold Krishnamacharya and Guruji Iyengar as authorities in some sort of way, then I think it's important for you to know something about their Vedanta lineage. They would say that within all beings is your Ātman and the Antaryamin, a subtle Ātman that pervades your own Ātman, and that's Bhagavan, and it's distinct. So there's very complicated theologies that are rich, very, very, very theologically rich. Just as Christianity has very rich, actually, brilliant theologians that, even my sitting in on this course, philosophy of science, and he's not a theist, but he says, this Augustine and Aquinas, he said, they were very, very, very intelligent men. So, okay, but I don't know why I said that. All right, higher than that, there is nothing to be known. Well, that must be God, given everything else that's gone before. So here's exegesis. Exegesis, right, is a term in philosophy and religion, and how to interpret a sacred text. Well, actually, hermeneutics. Exegesis is how you interpret a particular passage, and hermeneutics is just sort of method for interpreting scripture. Now, the Vedāntics have this method. They say, let's say there's a conflict. Let's say you're not sure. Higher than that, there's nothing to be known. It says here, this can be known, for it abides always within one's body, the Ātman. And so the Ātman's in the body. And then higher than that, there's nothing to be known. So the Ātman is the highest. So why are we talking about God then? So let's say somebody says that. But according to Vedanta hermeneutics, if there seems to be a contradiction, they came up with 6 principles. One is opening statements and conclusory statements carry more weight, just as we do in our writing, right? Your introduction and conclusion, summarize your whole thesis. Repetition. If there's a one-off contradiction in one place, or but the rest of the text, one point is being repeated consistently, but then some inconsistency pops up. Well, you take the repeated consistency over, you get that much more weight than the inconsistency. So they came up with 6 principles. So here, clearly they would say, higher than that, that must be God. Why? Because introduction was all about God. So far, it's been just repetitive. There are 3. So that cannot be the individual Ātman, even though this line might lead us to think that it's the Ātman. Okay? So that's, Vedanta interpretation. Vedanta is an intellectual, scholastic enterprise. And you've got to reconcile the sacred texts. That's what a theologian does. You can't say that there's a mistake in the text. Because if you say that, you've opened up Pandora's box. One mistake? Well, why not 100,000 then? Or 2, or 3. So your job of the theologian, the dharma of a theologian is, if you're a theologian, that means you believe in revelation. You believe that your text, the Christian, Islamic, the whole, hundreds and hundreds of years of interpretation of the Quran, of the Bible. And your job is to reconcile any conflicts, because what you can't do is say there's a mistake. Because then obviously a philosopher can say that, or a historian of the text can say that, but not a traditionalist. So they're the six processes of if there is a conflict, then there's sort of then you apply these 6 rules. Something has been repeated consistently, and then one odd statement seems to contradict that, then that gets it. Then you have to reread it in some other way. You have to take that as referring to God. Okay, the that here, this, or the this. When the enjoyer, all right, so that would be the Ātman, it discerns the object of enjoyment, that would be Prakriti, and the impeller, so right next to it, you've got you're back to the Triad. So clearly, that there must be God. Everything has been on, here it is again, the threefold Brahman. This is the 3rd time. He's really banging away at this number 3, not monistic, not 1, 3. When a fire is contained within its womb, in a piece of wood, one cannot see its visible form, and yet its essential character is not extinguished. The fire is there, latent in the piece of wood, just like the Ātman. One can grasp the fire once again from its womb by means of tinder. You can rub the tinder stick, and the fire will come out of the wood. In just the same way, one can grasp both within the body by means of the syllable Om. So both would be, I presume, God and the Ātman. Right? Om is Ishvara, even for Patanjali, Tasya Vachika Pranavaha. So Om can give you your Ātman as well as Ishvara. When one makes one's body, the bottom slab of the making fire, right? So the slab is a piece of wood at the bottom. and the syllable on the upper drill, right? You're drilling the wood by twirling it constantly through meditation, right? So the metaphor is you generate fire, but now you're making that metaphor into your body is the bottom slab, the Om is the stick that you're twirling, and by constantly through meditation, one would see God just as one would the hidden thing, the hidden fire will come out through that twirling process. That fire which is hidden comes out. So by meditation on Om, then both the Ātman can be perceived, well, Patanjali told us that, but God also. Like oil in sesame seeds, it's latent. It's in there, but you got to grind it out or press it out. Like butter in curds, right? It's in the curds. Like water in the riverbed, like fire in fire drills. In all these ways, something is latent, you need to bring it out. When one seeks it with truth and tapas, austerity, one grasps that self in the body, that all-pervading self which is contained in the body like butter in milk. Our Ātman, that is Brahman, the highest object of the teachings. He keeps translating this Upanishad as hidden connections. Does Ollie well. Our author, actually, he's very nice. I wrote him an email a couple of days ago. Was it with you that we read the Rig Vedic verse? And we had that question. And I said, I didn't look like a Rig Vedic verse. Wasn't that last week? Yeah, I wrote to him about it. I said I would, I did. And he said, there's not a Rig Vedic verse. He said, and the term is, he said he translated it as a Rig Vedic verse, but it's rich. And so he said, it's not a Rig Vedic verse, but that doesn't mean it was made up. It is it's a verse. He just happened to translate it as a Rig Vedic verse, which may be a little bit confusing. But he's nice, very nice of him to answer. Right. I don't want to get into all this. This is all Vedic stuff now, but let's just skim through it because we've already got through 40 minutes and we've got 6 chapters. So I don't want to get caught up with sort of Vedic ritualistic symbolism, but so just to get a sense, that's still lurking about, remember? Even the yogis in the forest, some of them are doing their sacred fires still. If they're Brahmins, they're still doing their dharmas, even if they're pursuing Ātman intensely. Even Krishna says, doesn't say give up the Vedic ritual. Krishna says in the Gita, in fact, it was me who established the Vedic ritual in the beginning. What Krishna says is give up the desire to get stuff from that, but don't give up the ritual. So this is all ritual. Yoking first his mind, extending his thoughts, Savitra, which is the sun, having recognized the fire as the light, brought it here from the earth. Somehow brought fire here. With minds yoked, we make the offering under the stimulus of the god Savitra for a heavenly abode. This is Vedic. We do offerings, okay? Minds are fixed. And this is the celestial being. This particular offering is 2. And where do you want? The heavenly abode, not liberation, the celestial realm and strength. Yoking the gods, right, through the ritual. You can now connect it with the gods. The gods have to, if you do it perfectly, the gods have no choice. You do it's a transaction. You chant your mantras perfectly, you don't make any mistakes. Then they have to do whatever the ritual, is dedicated to. So you're yoking them. Yoking the celestials, they go to heaven. Remember, heaven, this is not Christian heaven, this is a celestial realm, temporary place, with the mind, and to the firmament with their thought. Firmament, another word for this celestial realm. May Savitri stimulate them to create the lofty light, whatever that means. But all of this is connected with ritualism and getting to a celestial realm. So they yoke their minds, they yoke their thoughts, those inspired poets of the lofty poet, those are the rishis. That one alone who knows the patterns has apportioned the offerings, the patterns of the rituals, the offerings that put into it, and the praise is the Vedic hymns. Resounding is the praise of the god Savitra. I yoke with adoration with these hymns, the ancient formula, which is probably Brahman, of you two. I don't know what the two are, must be Ātman and God, I don't know. The praises, these are the Vedic hymns. If we had the Sanskrit, we could nail the words better. and on, right? So this is all ritualism. All the sons of the immortal hear them when they've reached their heavenly abodes. If you think this is a bit obscure, try reading the old Rig Vedic verse. I mean, we don't have a clue what half of those Rig Vedic verses are about, but it's this kind of language. This is very Rig Vedic, Samaveda, Yajurveda type language. Praises, oblations, the yoking the mind, the ritual, the celestials. All right, let's skip, and now we'll go to 8. Here is our proto yoga, along with the kata, the earliest reference to what clearly Patanjali is then Anushasanam, continuing to teach. The Anu, continuation of something previous where Upanishads, moksha dharma of the Mahabharata. Here it is. When he keeps his body straight, all of that work in asana, keep your body, this is the goal. With the 3 sections erect, and we looked it up once, I can't remember what it was, back, neck, 3 sections, somebody probably knows. When he draws the senses together, pratyahara, with the mind into his heart, pratyahara into the right, you're bringing in your consciousness, you're not letting it flow out through the senses. A wise man shall cross all the frightful rivers of samsara with the boat consisting of Om. That formulation, that's Om. This is just like Patanjali. The Sivachika, the japa. You do japa on that, on the tasya, on the Ishvarasya vachika, tasya vachika, pranava, the japa, the data bhavana. Come on, we recognize this, my friends. We're on terra firma here. Those of us who are yogis. By the way, I do love yoga. I know I'm always making these little comments. I'm just being silly. I do love yoga. Somebody wrote to me and said, "I know you hate yoga," but I'm like, no, I'm only joking. I love yoga. But although the last few years it's been very hard because of this back, but now hopefully, but I do love it. Where's Mary? Where's my friend Mary? She's up there. Mary, don't I love yoga? She's not sure. She's gonna give me a 5 out of 10. All right. So, compressing his breaths in here and curbing his movements, right? That's pranayama. A man should exhale through one nostril when his breath is exhausted. Come on, we don't need me to tell you what that is. A wise man should keep his mind vigilantly under control. And the metaphor of just as he would that wagon yoked to unruly horses. Remember the metaphor of the chariot with the 5 horses? And what was that? That was the kata we read. And the passenger is the Ātman. The chariot is the body. The driver is the intelligence. The reins is the mind, are the mind. And then the horses are the senses. And if you don't control the horses with the mind, which is controlled by the intelligence, it's very dangerous. Horses will just pull, 5 horses will pull in different directions. That's a recipe for a disaster. So that metaphor we read in the kata. Control the mind, just like the 5 unruly horses. Okay, here's the ideal place for yoga practice, my friends. Level and clean, free of gravel, fire and sand, near noiseless running waters and the like. And I always thought, well, noiseless running water, because it's kind of like, oh, nice background noise, like some of those Omi CDs, right, where you have sort of running water and then someone's playing. I thought it was like that. But then one time I was actually sitting to meditate in the Alps, and it was full of black flies. It was absolutely impossible. And then I sat on a rock in the middle of the river, and there were no flies. And then I thought, you know what? Maybe that's what this means. Near noiseless running water. Maybe that keeps the gnats and the bugs away. So anyway, here it is. And the like. Pleasing to the mind, right? Because you want to create a sense of sattva, so you want to have a pleasing place, but not offensive to the eye. So you don't have to go, some awful place. Provided with a cave or a nook sheltered from the wind. So these are the real full-time yogis. They renounce society. And this is your proverbial, sage in the Himalaya living in a cave. Here it is. We've all heard the stories of, of autobiographies of so many people that did this sort of thing, including Krishnamacharya. Here it is. Provided with a cave or a nook sheltered from the wind, in such a spot should one engage in yogic practice. And this all sounds a little bit tantric here, with the different, when the Kundalini rises up through the various chakras, there are various, psychedelic is not the right word, but supernormal sounds and sensations and visions and smells even. So mist, smoke, sun, wind, fire, fireflies, lightning, crystal, moon. These are the apparitions that, within yogic practice, precede and pave the way to the full manifestation in Brahman. So, Patanjali does talk about siddhis, mystic powers, but he doesn't mention anything like this. But some tantric traditions will have descriptions that maybe not identical to this, but closer to this than anything Patanjali has to say. That there are apparitions. And that doesn't just mean visual. It means sensual occurrences. Do some of you remember in Patanjali Yoga Sutra, in the chapter 1, when he talks about Ishvara, he says in the Ishvara Pranidhana Va, and then he gives a list of 5 other Vas. Or you can, fix the mind on the prana. Or you can, and then one of them is, I can't remember whether it's the tip of the nose or the sense of smell. And the commentators say something like this: that's a supernormal sense of smell, and you can use that as the focus of your mind. So anyway, these supernormal sorts of things. So here he's specifying here that apparitions will appear and be indicators, sort of signposts that the manifestation, that one's heading in the right direction. Okay, this is not Patanjali. It's not, don't think yoga is going to require any of this. This is the Shveta, but it's interesting. But the Tantrikas will probably relate to this more. By the Tantrikas, I mean Hatha/Siddha/Tantra cluster of traditions. You can call them Hatha, you can call them Siddha, the Siddha traditions, or you can call them Tantra, or you can call them Kundalini traditions. And what's the common denominator of them all? Kundalini. And then the Nadi, there's a much more emphasis on subtle physiology. The Sushumna, the Sushumna, and the other two, the channels, and the name escapes me right now. And then the whole system of whatever is 84,000 nadis and the chakras and so that cluster of traditions we can call Hatha, because that means force, because you have to sort of awaken the Kundalini by force, whether by mantra, whether by left-handed techniques like sexual practices, but without ejaculating, you injaculate. So that potency of the ejaculation gets reversed. So that's the left-handed tantra way of awakening the Kundalini, or whether a Shakti part from the Guru. But anyway, so there you have it. Do what you will with it. Verse 12. Lightness, health, absence of greed, bright complexion, very nice and sattvic, pleasant voice. I don't know who you'd be talking to, but pleasant voice, a sweet smell, and very little feces and urine. That's how you can tell you're not eating too much. Have a look at how much you're pooping. That'll tell you. So very little feces and urine, which is just a yogic way of saying you're not eating very much. What's wrong with saying it like that? Just because we have our modern conventions and we don't like to say things like that around the dinner table. Well, if you're a yogi sitting in a cave or a nook, what do you care about? So, sort of 17th century French derived table manner conventions. Why would you care about that? So very little feces and urine. That, they say, is the first working of yogic practice. So you're controlling your food intake, and then your body is in a state of sattva. Even Krishna says in the Gita, when sattva is prominent, the gates of the body are luminous. He says that, whatever that means, but he says that. So your senses are are sattvic. They function more clearly. Just as a disc smeared with clay, once it's cleaned well, shines brightly like a brass plate, so also an embodied person, once he has perceived the true nature of the self, becomes solitary, his goal attained and free of sorrow. Remember, the point is to get beyond suffering. The very first verse of Sankhya Karika states it clearly. Even Krishna gives 3 definitions of yoga, and one of them is to take one beyond suffering. Right? Even Patanjali. Sarvam dukkam. And then he says, heyam anagatam. Anagatam, heyam anagatam. That's suffering, which is yet you can be free of that. So ultimately, well, maybe let's reverse that. Preliminarily, the path of yoga is embarked upon because we are suffering. Just call it a spade. Right out, just call it a spade. We suffer, therefore we seek a solution. And as the Sankhya Karikas say, all known means have failed us. We tried sex, we tried this, we tried that, we tried to run around, to travel, or whatever. No, none of it alleviated our suffering. So then we think, okay, let me do something radically different. And then you bump into the Bhagavad Gita on the East-West bookstore and say, all right, let me give this a go. It all starts with suffering. So it becomes solitary because once you're really deeply involved in the quest for the Ātman, my friends, you are no longer able to engage in mundane social life, frankly. You'll do whatever your Dharma requires you to do, politely, nicely, and kindly, but you're not going to go run it. Your interest in socializing in just a sort of superficial, frivolous, non-yogic way, it just evaporates. So that's the solitariness in a good way, because you really now have this other goal. When by means of the true nature of the self, which resembles a lamp in the sense that it's luminous, a man or woman practicing yogic restraint, tapas, sees here the true nature of Brahman. Here. Not you dying and hope for the best, hope you wake up in heaven. No, here, in this world, in this body, in this life. When that happens, he's freed from all fetters, the fetters being karma, because he has known God, unborn, unchanging, and unsullied by all objects. And that's the thing about the Upanishad. Sometimes, there seems to be the boundaries between God and the Ātman. Sometimes they talk about Ātman, sometimes God, and, it's not systematic, which is why Badarayana came along and wrote the Vedānta Sutra. No other reason. Systematize the Upanishads. Where there's contradictions, clarify it. That is the Vedānta Sutra. Nothing other than that. This God pervades all quarters. He was born the first, yet remains within the womb. See, now what are we talking about? God with a capital G. How is he in the womb? That will be the Ātman. So you see how this is not particularly consistent? Or does it mean that God accompanies the Ātman in the womb? I don't think we have grounds to argue that strongly from the Shveta, but Ramanuja would say it. God, the Antaryami and the Ātman, Paramatma and Ātman, both together. But here we have a statement that seems to be about God, Ishvara, the big G, and born the first. Well, first of all, he shouldn't have been born at all. But if that just simply means he's the primordial being, okay, we can deal with that. But then he remains within the womb. What are we going to do with that? How does God remain within the womb? Unless you want to say something like the Ātman is the spark of God. I mean, there's ways around it all, but you have to work. You have to engage in theological work in order to fit. If you're a theologian and you want to impose consistency on this text, you're going to have to work at it. You're going to have to say, well, no, this is not really God. It's a spark of God. So it's God, but a spark. And you're going to have to apply your hermeneutics, your method. Can't get away with it. Vaishnava, Shaiva, whoever you are. Or Christian. He who abides as God in the fire, who abides in the water, who has entered every being, who abides in the plant, who abides in, to that God adoration. So we'd have to, I mean, I would take this most definitely. He's entered every being in the form of the Ātman, because everything is God, but that doesn't mean that God is not distinct. That God supports everything, maintains everything, but and accompanies everything, but is still distinct. And so many verses in the Shveta say that. There's no way around that. He alone wielding the net. And again, you look in the footnotes, not quite sure what that means. Does that, Olivelle says that's the sun rays. I don't see why he says that's the sun rays. I would say that for me, that, I don't know. But I would take that as something like the law of karma. You know, we have Indra's net much later on, but whatever it is. But some kind of, clearly a net is something that traps creatures. What else is a net? Right, so you have a fishing net, and you have various nets. So therefore, clearly, for me, anyway, I don't know why he takes that as sun rays, because it's a net. I would take it as karma or maya, or that it's trapping us all. But there you see that a word like this can be interpreted differently. Reigns by his sovereign powers, reigns over all worlds by his sovereign powers, who also alone is present in their rise and birth. Those who know this become immortal. So here we've got God again. Clear now, it's clear. He's present at their rise and birth, distinct from, transcendent. There is only one Rudra, monotheism. Another name for Shiva is Hara, and Rudra are the two names of the Shveta. He's not tolerated as a second who would reign over, who is not tolerated as a second. One Rudra who would reign over these worlds by his sovereign powers. After drawing in all beings, he stands at the protector at the end of time, turning west toward men. And I don't know why west, but probably has something to do with the auspicious direction. And I bet you'll find some reference to Vedic rituals being facing west or something like that. If we look for it, we'll probably find it fairly easily. Eyes everywhere, faces everywhere, arms everywhere, feet everywhere. He forges with the two hands, he forges with the wings, producing the heaven and earth, the one God. What does all this mean? These are all the embodied beings. These are all all the beings in creation. Could mean that. And then, of course, we have the universal form in 11th chapter of the Gita. Krishna shows that battlefield form with heads everywhere, eyes everywhere, arms everywhere. Is it something like that? Who knows? We don't know. You can go and read Shankara 1,300 years later, and I think that's a great thing to do. Ramanuja never wrote a commentary on the Upanishads, but Madhva did. Hardcore dualist, intense opposer of the 12th century opposer of Shankara. And they differ completely and utterly in the way they interpret these verses. And then you have, what Olivelle and modern scholars, and they use different methods. They'll say, well, what does it mean here? Well, over there in this earlier section, it means this. And they'll have different kind of comparative ways of trying to construe meaning. So it's all interesting. It's all useful. Who is the source and origin of the gods? Ruler over them all. Here are the little gods. As the god Rudra and the great seer, in the beginning created Hiranyagarbha, which later tradition would say is Brahma, not Brahman, but Brahma, the creator god with the four heads, the first yogi. May he furnish us with lucid intelligence. That form of yours, O Rudra, a form, which is benign and not terrifying. Unlike the form Krishna shows Arjuna in the 11th chapter is terrified. Arjuna freaks out. Which is not sinister looking. That most auspicious form of yours, O mountain dweller, right here, then we have the association of Shiva, that later Puranic tradition. Shiva is sitting in the Himalaya, meditating on his own inner self. What else is he going to meditate on? Although Vaishnavas would like to say he's meditating on Vishnu. So when we see Shiva, you see him in iconography, you've seen him in poster art and pop art. Typically he will be up there in the Himalayas, and his wife Parvati is a mountain. His very wife Parvat is a mountain. So she's the daughter of the Himalayas. So here we have it, right? Earlier, as early as this, the mountain dweller. Look upon us, the arrow, O mountain dweller, that you hold in your hand to shoot. Make it benign, O mountain protector. Hurt not man or beast. Who is higher than that? Higher than Brahman? There we have it again. It's not some lower illusory Brahman, higher Brahman. The immense one hidden in all beings, and each according to its kind. So really you do get a sense that God is with the Ātman. That's certainly how I read this myself. Each according to its kind, different form, who encompasses the whole universe. When people know him as the Lord, they become immortal. So now what's the qualification for liberation? Not just knowing the Ātman, but knowing God, the Lord, Isha. I know that immense person, having the color of the sun and beyond darkness. Only when a man knows him does he pass beyond death. Gita will say the same thing. Bhagavatam will say the same thing. You want liberation, you can only, even if you just want your own Ātman, and you're not interested in God, even that's dependent on, the Patanjali says, Samadhi Siddhi, Ishvara Pranidhanad. Look at this, there's no other path for getting there, only knowing God. This whole world is filled by that person, beyond whom there is nothing, beneath whom there is nothing, smaller than whom there is nothing, larger than whom there is nothing, who stands like a tree planted firmly in heaven. What is higher than that is without visible appearance and free from affliction. Higher than what? The world, the heaven. Those who know it become immortal, and you said that about 10 times now. Knowing God will become immortal. We attain perfection. As for the rest, only suffering. Sarvam dukkam, sarvam dukkam. Yeah, you don't seek God. Yeah, we're suffering. That's what these texts say. All of the moksha texts. That's the common denominator. Buddhism, Jain, Hindu, all of them. The purpose of life, the only way to be free of suffering is to seek the self in the Jnana traditions, Bhagavan in these bhakti traditions. Otherwise, suffering, suffering, suffering. Who is the face, head, and neck of all, who resides deep in the heart of all beings, pervades everything. He is the blessed one. Therefore, the benign one is present everywhere. I mean, any theism would say something like that. God pervades everything. The person, clearly, is the immense Lord. He is the one who sets in motion the real. Do you see how different this is from the earlier Upanishads, my friends? The Brihad. How it's really kind of strong theism. Probably because it's not responding to the earlier Upanishads, but it's clearly, to me anyway, it feels to me like it's, it's stressing theism because the theism hadn't been stressed enough in the earlier Upanishads. So the author of this is really going overboard to say things like, only through him. Right, where do you say that? That sounds a bit like John, doesn't it? Only through Christ. Where do you say that? There is no other path for getting there. So this is a really sort of, I don't mean to be disrespectful. I say in your face, that sounds disrespectful, but it's a very forceful, let's put it that way, theism. And we get that in the Gita too. Person clearly is the immense Lord. He is the one who sets in motion the real. Somebody needs to tell Aristotle that. Aristotle, your prime mover. Aristotle didn't, his prime mover didn't even know. He's not even aware of the world. Because Aristotle wants him to be so completely free of any taint, but also free of change. Because if he changes, then he would not be eternal. So if he's aware of the world, then the world's changing, and his awareness of the world would be changing, so he would be changing. So Aristotle's prime mover is simply the object of attraction of the celestial spheres. He's trying to explain why does the universe revolve, and the universe revolves because it's attracted to God, but God is completely unaware of, not even aware of the world, because if he was aware of it, he'd change. That's his prime mover. Someone needs to go back in time. We were talking in the philosophy of religion yesterday, philosophy of science. The idea of I didn't quite fully understand it because I'm just sitting in, I'm not doing the reading. But it's taken very seriously that even though it may be impossible for humans. Theoretically, from the point of view of physics, it is possible to go back in time. And my understanding was something to do with the curvature of the universe. It is, and velocities, and maybe it involved going beyond this. I didn't quite know, sort of going in and out of the lecture. But if you could go back in time, then you might tell Aristotle that where is it? The prime mover who sets in motion the real. Say, Aristotle, it's Shveta says it's Rudra. The imperishable one rules over the light, this totally flawless attainment. The person the size of a thumb. Now it's clearly the Ātman. Elsewhere, it's like you take the tip of a hair and divide it into 10,000. And here it says the person the size of a thumb. So now what? Well, then the commentators say they got to reconcile this. Right? Contradiction. So what's the job of the commentator? Got to reconcile it. So what do they say? Oh, they say when it describes it as being the size of the thumb, it's metaphoric just to help us, meditate on it. Because if you say it's 10,000 the size of the tip of a hair, how the hell are you going to meditate on that? So that's how they resolve it. But just to give us just to sort of reinforce this point of the role of the commentator in making sense of these passages and reconciling contradictions. With the heart, with insight, with thought, has he been contemplated. Those who know this become immortal. The person has 1,000 heads. This is the Purusha Shukta, Sahasra Shirsha Purushaha, Sahasraksha Sahasrapad, ancient Rig Vedic verse. This whole world is just a person, whatever there was, whatever there will be. Even over immortality he rules when he rises above the world through food. What does that mean? The world is sustained through food and he's transcendent to it, perhaps. And the same thing, hands, feet everywhere, heads, feet everywhere, blah, 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 right? Just like the Gita. That which appears to possess the powers of all the senses, but is devoid of every sense, right? So Ishwara is omniscient. So with the senses, you can see, you hear, you smell. So Ishwara has all those powers, but is devoid of sense. He's not embodied. The Lord, the ruler of the whole world. Do you see how this is stressed time and time and time and time again? This is theism making a forceful entrance into the Vedic landscape. The vast refuge of the whole world. With the fault with 9 gates, there's your body. 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, mouth, genital, anus. How many is that? 9. If not, I missed something. The embodied one flutters to the outside like a goose. There's your goose. So consciousness pours out through the 9 gates, through the eyes, through the ears, flutters to the outside. Why flutter? Because it's a goose. That's the metaphor of the Ātman. It is the master of the whole world. Let's see here now we're talking about the Ātman. So there's sometimes the same language talking about the Ātman is used for God. This is why it's unsystematic. He moves swiftly but has no feet, grasps but has no hands. So this is typical Upanishadic language. Sees but has no ears, hears but has no ears, knows what there is to know, but there is no one who knows him. They call him the first and immense person. Right? We've had this all before in previous Upanishads. This sounds like the Gita. Finer than the finest, larger than the larger. It's the self that lies here, hidden in the heart of a living being. A man who by the Creator's grace, so now even seeing the Ātman is the Creator's grace, sees that desireless one, right? He's got to be free of desire if you're going to see it, free of the kleshas, as the majesty, and as the Lord will be free from sorrow. So again, get this morphing or this going backwards and forwards between Ātman. Is it talking about Ātman? Is it talking about God? Not systematic. I know that our aging and ancient one is the self in all beings, is present in all because of his pervasiveness, the one about whom those who inquire after Brahman proclaim. He always brings about the cessation of birth. Okay, let's keep going. Who alone, himself without color, wielding his power, creates variously countless colors, and in whom the universe comes together at the beginning and dissolves in the end, clearly talking about God now. May he furnish us with lucid intelligence. I'm not going to read this. It's just a little esoteric. Here, reincarnation. Now you're a woman. Next life, you're a woman. Now you're a man. Now you're a boy, or also a girl. As an old man, you trotter along with a walking stick, right? The Ātman is in all these different bodies. As you're born, you turn your face in every direction. We've been everything. The traditions say anadi, we've had unlimited births. So we've been men, women, girls, boys, all of this. You're the dark blue bird. You're the green one with red eyes. The rain cloud. Don't know what that means. The seasons and the oceans. You live as one without a beginning. Because of your pervasiveness, you from whom all beings have been born. I'm going to skip the next one. Go on, we'll do it. So here we have the one unborn billy goat. That's the soul full of raga, desire, burning with passion. And the female is Prakriti. Covers one unborn female, nanny goat, colored red, white, and black. So this would be maybe some kind of reference to the gunas. Who knows? I don't know what black would be, tamas. White would be. But you know what? The Vedantins don't. Well, I won't get into that. And they're giving birth to numerous offspring with the same colors as hers, right? From Prakriti comes creation, and everything is sattva, rajas, and tamas. It's all red, white, and black. Everything is the gunas. So one billy goat is enjoying Prakriti. What does Patanjali say? Bhoga pavarga. Why is she there? Prakriti. Bhoga, you want to enjoy it? Try it. Good luck. When you had enough suffering, pick up your Bhagavad Gita again. When your butt has been kicked, you've been humiliated enough, frustrated enough, pick up your Yoga Sutra. So Bhoga or Apavarga. So, well, another unborn male leaves her as soon as she has finished enjoying the pleasures. Why is she? He, the unborn male. So in other words, one Ātman is still embroiled in trying to enjoy Prakriti, and the other has renounced Vairagya. And this again is a verse that the theists say that God is always with the Ātman. Shankara wouldn't read it this way. Two birds who were companions and friends nestle on the very same tree of the body. One of them eats a tasty fig, the other not eating looks on. So the dualist would say that's God. Always accompanies the other bird. Stuck on the very same tree, one person grieves, the one who's eating the fig. Why? Because he's never satisfied. Fig doesn't satisfy. The fruits of the world don't satisfy. One grieves, deluded by her who is not the Lord. But when he sees the other, the contented Lord, and the Lord's majesty, his grief disappears. So in other words, when the one bird turns to the other bird and says, here I am, ignoring God, eating away at this fig of the world, the fruits of the world, but the other bird is just sitting there waiting. So that's how reasons like this that I read the previous verses where we said is going backwards and forwards, that God is, I would follow Ramanuja here, that God accompanies the Ātman in every birth. And that's a wonderfully kind thing to do. That Vishnu, in the Vaishnava way of thinking, it expands himself into unlimited little Vishnus called Paramatmas that enter in the heart of every creature, and waits and waits and waits and waits until the Ātman, frustrated from suffering, turns back to God. I think that's what's going on here. But it's certainly going on this verse. Look, stuck in the very same tree, one person grieves, deluded by her who is not the Lord. But when he sees deluded by the things of the world, not the Lord, but when he sees the other, the contented Lord and the Lord's majesty, when he sees God, his grief disappears. So we can turn to God at two birds and companions and friends. One of them eats a tasty fig, the other not eating, looks on, just waits. But it's the one bird's too busy eating a fig, life after life after life after life. But then, once he stuck on the same tree, one person grieves, suffers, dukkam, deluded by her who is not the Lord, Prakriti. But when finally one fine day and one fine birth, he sees the other, the contented Lord, Lord's majesty, grief disappears. Right. Syllable amidst the rig is probably Om, the syllable among which all the gods are seated in the highest heaven. Om. When a man does not know it, what will he do with the rig? Seated here together are people who do know it. So that would be, I'm fairly sure, the syllable Om, because it does go back to the Rig Veda. And here another dig at the Vedic rituals. Meters, sacrifices, rites, religious observances, the past, the future, and what the Vedas proclaim. From that, the illusionist creates this whole world. It's all illusion, all of these sacrifices for a better life, prosperity, celestial realm. Remember what we said. For us, it's lighting a candle to the Virgin Mary saying, gimme, gimme, this is gimme, gimme religion. All that. Same mindset. Just we light a candle and they lit a fire. What's different? We're both lighting fire, actually. One should recognize the illusory power as matter. Matter itself is Maya. Krishna says, Devi hi esha guna mai mama Maya. My Maya is nothing other than the gunas themselves. That is Maya. I mean, it's not like Maya is some other thing and the gunas is something different. Maya is the gunas. Of course, that's the Gita, but same thing here. The illusory power is primal matter. And the illusionist, as the great Lord, Krishna says, Mama Maya, this is my Maya. So just framed differently. This whole living world is thus pervaded by things that are parts of him. That's the way to think of it. That they are parts. That there is Brahman as God, Brahman as the world, Brahman as the souls, who alone presides over womb after womb, in whom this whole world comes together and dissolves, just like Vedanta says, second sutra, Janmadhyasya, that from which the world, creation, maintenance, destruction emanates, and destruction, dissolves back into. When someone recognizes that Lord, who fulfills wishes as the God who is to be adored, he attains this unending peace. The source and origin of the gods, ruler over them all, as the god Rudra. See, if I was translating this, I'd put a capital G here. He does elsewhere. Look, there he's got capital G, see? So it's not consistent. Should be capital G here. Because he's clearly talking about Rudra here. There's no confusion. As the great seer looked on as Hiranyagarbha was being born, the first created being, Hiranyagarbha. You've seen the pictures of him. Of course, usually the Vaishnavas have him sitting on the lotus coming out of Vishnu's navel. First yogi. And if we had time, we could read the story of Hiranyagarbha, Brahma. May he furnish us with lucid intelligence. What was he talking about? The intelligence to understand who we are and what the goal of life is. Not be confused by petty pleasures. Who is the supreme lord of the gods, on whom the worlds rest, who rules over the bipeds and quadrupeds here? To what god should we offer oblations? Maybe this is sarcastic. What are we going to offer? Some oblations to some little celestial being? When the supreme lord, all the worlds rest on him and rules over everything, what are we going to offer? Some 2-bit little, ghee in the fire to some other little celestial? Maybe that's how you could read this. It's hard to tell. Who is finer than the finest? He's repeating. The midst of disorder is the creator of the universe, displaying various forms, who alone encompasses the universe. When someone recognizes him as the benign one, he attains unending peace. Again and again and again. That liberation, peace, all of this comes from recognizing God. We've had that numerous times. It's he who protects the world at the right time, the Lord of the universe hidden in all beings. When someone thus knows him, after whom seers and gods strive, little gods, see, now he's got the little gods, so you should have Rudra as the big god, the big G. He severs the fetters of death. Again. When someone knows the one who is extremely fine, like the spume on top of the ghee. Don't know if you make ghee, you get these little bubbles and you scoop them off. And then as the benign one hidden in all beings, when someone recognizes him, who alone encompasses the universe as God, now he's got the big G, he's freed from all fetters. He's repeating it again and again. That's how you get liberation. This is theism, my friends. Like really, really, really sort of, strong theism. Forceful might be an acceptable word. Forceful theism. Like, and again, maybe it just needs to sort of really establish that, just like Patanjali, he felt the need to systematize yoga, because you just had the reference we read, right, about the keeping the 3 sections of the body straight and meditating near running water. You just had 8 verses here, few verses in the Katha, and that's it. And then maybe it's some stuff in the Mahabharata. So Patanjali comes along and just really stresses and writes a whole thing just on yoga practice. So that's one way of thinking about the Shveta. That there's been references to God in the older Upanishads, but not really. Mostly the Upanishads seem to be talking about realizing the Ātman rather than the supreme Ātman. So maybe the Shveta really felt like, hang on a minute, this is getting occluded. This is getting, they're not getting the attention it deserves. And then maybe that's why it has this very strong tone, as the Gita does. So the God, the maker of all, the immense self, is always residing in the hearts of people. So clearly there are two. We can't get away from this. And there's no other way of making sense of this. There's the Ātman, and then the manifestation of God with the Ātman. And Vaishnavas interpreted that way. I'd be curious. I don't know enough about the Shaiva traditions to know if they. I'm going to guess the Shaiva Siddhantans read it that way, but I don't know. I don't know enough about the Shaiva traditions. With the heart, with insight, with thought, has he been contemplated. Those who know this become immortal. When there was darkness, sounds like Genesis, then there was neither day nor night, neither the existent nor the non-existent. Right, this is in between the creation. The benign one alone was there. He was the imperishable. He was the glory of Savitri. Looks like it's a quote, so he's quoting some other text. And from him has come forth the ancient wisdom. So God before creation, between creative cycles. And here's the difference between Shaivism and Vaishnavism. The Vaishnavas would say it's Vishnu who creates, and the Shaivas would say no, it's Shiva. They both accept each other's deity as Ishvara. The Shaivas accept Vishnu and Krishna and all the Vaishnava claims, and as do the Vaishnavas, the Shaiva claims. But each claim that the other deity is a secondary derivative manifestation from theirs. So the Shaivas say Shiva is original and Vishnu derives from, is a manifestation from Shiva. That's what I mean by derivative. And Vaishnavas say the reverse. But other than that, that's a sectarian quibble. That's what it separates there's many things, but that's one of the main things that separates the claims of the Shaivas and the Vaishnavas. And they've had this Leela, they've had this rasa going right back to this time. Because the Gita's is making its case at the same, if we go by academic dates, the language is very similar. The type of Sanskrit very similar to that of the Gita. No one will catch hold of him from above, from across, or in the middle. There's no likeness of him whose name is immense glory. Its appearance is beyond the range of sight. No one can see him with his sight. Krishna says in the Gita, Arjuna says, show me that form of yours. Krishna says, you can't see me with your this present eyes. Divya dadami te chakshush. And therefore I'll give you divine eyes. And the Old Testament has a number of references like this. You can't see him with your regular eyes, because our regular eyes can only see prakritic things, of course. The eyes are made of prakriti. How are they going to see something made of Brahman? They're made of prakriti. They can only see prakritic things. They're not made to be able to see anything other than what they themselves are made of. How are they going to see something beyond their own constitution? Those who know him thus with their hearts, him who abides in their hearts, and with insight become immortal. So he's in the heart of all. He's the unborn one. So some man filled with awe takes refuge with Rudra. Protect me always with that kindly face of yours. That is the prayer of the Bhakta. Krishna says, Yoga Kshema Vaham Yaham. I will take care of all your needs. Do not hurt us in our offspring or descendants in our life, in our cattle or horses. That's a very materialistic thing to say. Other Bhakti traditions would say, no, don't ask God for anything. What are you asking God to protect you? Just ask God for bhakti. That's high. That's real bhakti. This started to sound like gimme bhakti. Do not slay in anger, O Rudra, O valiant man. Oblations in hand, we invite you to your seat. Right at the sacrifice. When you have the Vedic sacrifice, the gods are invited. In the Mahabharata says in the first yuga, the 4 yugas, the 4 ages, the celestial beings actually sat at the sacrifice and were visible. And then in the second age, they sat at the sacrifice but were not visible. And the third age, can't remember, something along those lines. And the Kali Yuga, the rituals of disaster. There's no more rituals. So there's no question of the gods attending in Vedic rituals. No one is performing them. 2 things, jnana and ajnana, vidya, avidya. Knowledge and ignorance are set down in the imperishable, infinite fort of Brahman, where they lie hidden. Right? So you can be vidya, Patanjali, all that talk of viveka, vidya, avidya. Now, ignorance is the perishable, avidya. If you don't know the Ātman, then what do you know? Prakriti. And what's Prakriti? Perishable. So everything you know is perishable. Your knowledge is perishable by definition because Prakriti is always changing. So if we don't know the Ātman, any knowledge that we have is perishable. And knowledge is the immortal. Knowledge is to know that which is not perishable. What's not perishable? The Sat, what's that? The Ātman. But the one who rules over both knowledge and ignorance is none other still, beyond both, not subject to knowledge or ignorance. As Patanjali says, Klesha karma samaya anavichinnaha, are not affected by kleshas, like ignorance, who alone presides over womb after womb, the whole process of reincarnation. And again, if with this reading that he accompanies the Ātman, which is a reading. And thus over all visible forms and all the sources of birth, who in the beginning carried this Kapila. Kapila is the founder of Sankhya. Even the Bhagavatam accepts that. Bhagavata Purana. I can't leave you without a little bit of Bhagavatam, my friends. It would be against my dharma. Look, this is the Bhagavatam. Although he himself is actually unborn Kapila, who is Bhagavana, Vishnu here. This is what Vaishnavas say, Kapila is Vishnu, who is Kapila in person, took birth through his spiritual potency as the expounder of Sankhya philosophy, so as to impart knowledge of the Ātman to mankind. So just as the Vaishnavas say that Vishnu is the creator, Shaivas say Shiva, they both claim Kapila. But they both agree that Kapila is the founder of Sankhya. So that's interesting. So tradition says Kapila is the founder, the original expounder of Sankhya philosophy, which means, Ātma, Jnana. Bhagavatam is Bhagavan, meaning Vishnu. Shveta, we'll read his name again. He in the beginning carried this Kapila, Shiva did, in the beginning carried this Kapila, born of the seer, not sure what that means. This Kapila born of the seer. I don't know what that references. Together with this body of knowledge, right, this body of Sankhya, and would look on him as he was being born. So Rudra looks upon Kapila, who's born of the seer. I'm not sure how that works, but it doesn't matter. Spreading out one net after another. There's your net again. I would take that to be illusion. In diverse ways within this world, this God gathers them in, all living beings, after creating it once again. So all traditions except Mimamsa accept cyclical creativity. So after creating it once again, the Lord likewise tears it down. The immense self, Ātman, exercises his sovereignty over the whole world. As there's 6 chapters, my friend, we're halfway through the 5th, and Lakshmi is with us tonight for Kirtan. We will end our Svadhyaya with Kirtan, so do stay if you care to. As the draft ox shines, lighting up the quarters, above, below, and across. Is this a reference of the sun? I forgot to look it up. Maybe. So this God, blessed and adorable, alone rules over wombs and inherent natures. As the womb of all, not only ripens by its inherent nature, like laws of, I guess physicists would say gravity and all that, but karma is how the Hindus would think of it, as what an inherent nature. But also will bring all those in need of ripening to full development. The Nyaya tradition, the logicians, the later tradition, when they talk about Ishvara and they're using reason to argue for the existence of Ishvara, and one of their main arguments, meaning who is going to bring karma, who's going to ripen, who is going to oversee that the law of karma, that the right effect is connected to the right causal agent. And here you get something along those lines. But also would bring all those in need of ripening to full development. Who does that? Who brings? Why does my karma come to me and not jump on somebody else? What's that law? We've got laws of gravity, and laws are just forces. Forces are just movements. That's all they are. And then we give them names. We don't know what they are. We just see what they do, and they do different types of things. So then we give them different names. So that Hindus would say, oh, that's all right. But what about the law of karma? That's another force that does stuff. It brings effects to causal agents. He alone rules over this whole world. It is hidden in the secret Upanishad of the Veda, recognizing it right there. So he's hidden, this Rudra. Recognize it, O Brahmins, as the womb of Brahman. That's God. Brahman comes from God. The gods of old and the seers who knew it became of one essence with it, and so came to be immortal. There again, one essence. What does that mean? We know what Shankara would say it means. You merge with it, not the dualists. No, you become one essence because you're both Ātmans. You're both Purusha, but one's a Purusha Vishesha, one's a special kind of, one's a supreme Purusha. The one who, in association with the qualities, we're running out of time, so let's jump down. So here you have the size of the Ātman, large as a thumb, equal in appearance of the sun. But one sees also another, here's the one about the hair split into 100 parts. When the tip of a hair is split into 100 parts, I said 1,000, sorry. Oh no, it is 1,000. And one of those parts further into 100 parts, so isn't that 1,000, 100? No, that's 10,000. So if you take a hair, split into 100, and then take one of those hundreds and split that into 100, the individual soul, on the one hand, is the size of one such part. And previously it said it would size of a thumb. So that's what the theologians then have to work out. And right up here it says it's as large as a thumb. So clearly, that it seems to me them theologians have every right to say, well, this is useful for meditation. How do you meditate on something that's 1/10,000th the tip of a hair? It's neither a woman nor a man or even a hermaphrodite. The Ātman is ruled over by whichever body it obtains. Whatever body is imposed upon it then consumes it consciousness. Consciousness is then absorbed in that body. But in itself, in neither man, woman, or in between, or anything else. The birth and growth of the body takes place through the offerings of intention, touch, and sight. Well, Olivelle takes this as sex, actually. That you have with intention, then you touch and sight, and I don't know if he's right about it, but that's what he wants to read this as. Could be, right? Intention, and then there's touch is sex. I guess sight, you're attracted to your partner, or something like that. By means of food, drink, and impregnation, so why not? Whereas the embodied self assumes successively in different situations the physical appearance that corresponds to its action. It takes the body corresponding to its karma, embodied self. Body comes from all of this: intention, touch, sight, food, drink, and impregnation. And the embodied self just then is trapped in that. It takes whatever different situation, it takes the physical appearance that correspond to its actions. There's your karma. The embodied self assumes numerous physical appearances, both large and small, in accordance with its qualities. Be an elephant, be a dinosaur, according with its qualities as actions. One sees also another cause of their union in accordance with the qualities of the actions in the body. I don't know why that's another. It seems to be the same thing. Anyway, it basically karma. It's without beginning or end. And I'm sorry, the Upanishad is like that. I don't think anyone has any right to pretend they know exactly what these verses mean. I mean, some of them are clearer than others. So, that's just the way it is. Read the footnotes in Oliver. And if you say, well, he's a modern scholar, why should we listen to him? That's fair enough. Then read Shankara, but read Madhava then, and see how different the two of them, both Vedantins. They both speaking Sanskrit at the age of 4, know the text inside out, every text. Madhava wrote commentary in the Rig Veda even, and see how different they interpret this. So therefore, there isn't what does this mean? You have to say, well, you could read it this way, you could read that. Oliver says it's this. And then Oliver quotes a bunch of other academic scholars. And if you don't like going down that route, then we'll go with Shankara, where Shankara says this, Madhava says that. This is why again, my friends, this is why the Vedanta Sutras were written, to give consistency and clarify this. Well, Hindus wouldn't say it's disordered, but in academics, Oliver calls it chaotic. And we certainly shouldn't go that far, but it isn't systematic. I think it's fair to say it's not systematic philosophy. So Vedanta comes along and writes Vedanta Sutra. So those who know him as God have cast aside their bodies, are liberated. Some wise men, now we're back to, all right, let's go back to the beginning, right? Here we are. This is our last chapter, and then we'll have our kirtan. Remember the beginning? I love the beginning. What is the cause of Brahman? Why are we born? On what do we live? On what we establish? Governed by whom? Is it time? Is it inherent nature? Is it necessity? Is it chance? Is it the elements? Is person? Right? And then he says that it's God. Those who follow, where does it say that? One alone is he who governs all those causes from time to self. Right? Time up here, down the end of the list is self. One alone. So we started the Upanishad off like that, and now the last chapter 6. And look at all these notes. Have a look at the notes, and you'll see, how. Look, Hara. The meaning of this term is unclear. In later times, it's an epithet of Shiva. Rao takes it to mean glow, and refers to Shukra, right? And then, look, what is, and you read it, and you'll see how nobody, there's so many things. Look, host child, Bhoktaram, followed by Smith, unnecessary conjecture, Sira, as if the word isn't the accusative. They don't agree on the grammar of it. Right? Oberles takes it in a compound. He translated it this way, because the Germans were big on this in the early times. They were great Vedic scholars up until the war, basically. See, here I follow Rao's emendation. He actually changes the Sanskrit. Here I follow Rao's emendation, Bhokta instead of Bhoktaram. See what's going on? It's really hard to translate. There's errors in it. Nobody knows what lots of things mean, right? This LV, whoever that is, suggests Dandaniva as the grammatically correct form, following this other scholar, right? But these other, right? So therefore, what's in the Upanishad can't be this. It's been modified. So do you get the point? Shall I belabor the point? I'm enjoying this. Let's belabor it a second more. Look, and he brings in Shankara, Tattvavaya. That's how Shankara reads. So he's reading it. Even Shankara is making changes. But see the parallel, following this one, following that one. They all have different readings. See Hochschild's reading. Right? Bodwich, light here may refer to the heavenly light. Sun, question mark. According to another interpretation, one could translate the. Point taken, my friends? Point taken? I'm having a good time. Can I just keep plugging it? Well, we'll finish up then, because we have our kirtan. Okay, back to 6. But do have a look at them if you care to, the notes. I think, all right. So back to where it started. Some wise men say it's inherent nature. It's just the property. Sankhya would say that. Some Sankhya, not all Sankhya. There's theistic Sankhya and non-theistic Sankhya. Well, others say it's time, all totally deluded. It's rather the greatness of God present in the world, by means of which this wheel of Brahman goes round. Aristotle, sounds like Aristotle. What's the wheel of the we calls it the circles of the constellation? Who always encompasses this world, the knower, the architect of time, the one without qualities, the all-knowing one. It says his command at the work of creation. What is that? To be considered earth, water, fire, air, and space unfolds itself as creation, right? It's matter. After completing that work and drawing it back again, cyclical creation, after joining himself with the realities one after another, all the tattvas, all these Sankhya evolutes, with one, with two, with three, or with eight, right? 8 is the 8. Intelligence, mind, ego, and the 8 that Gita talks about. Ashta, Minna Prakriti, Ashtada. 3 are the gunas. 2 is probably Purusha Prakriti, and the 1, it must be Ishvara. As well as with time and with the subtle qualities of the body. And after undertaking the works endowed with the gunas, he who would apportion all the modes of existence, when they're no more after creation, the work he has produced is destroyed. He carries on. Everything else goes back to the gunas. All the non-liberated Ātmans remain in the state of hibernation, and Ishvara remains. One sees him at the beginning as the basis and causes of the joining of the Purusha and Prakriti, as beyond the 3 times, past, present, future. Without parts, he's got no parts. So you can't, if he has no parts, you can't pull him apart. So he's eternal. Something eternal can't have parts. He from whom the unfolding of the world has come forth, creation, is higher than and different from the time-confined forms of the tree, the metaphor for Prakriti. That's standard. Is higher than and different from time confined. Prakriti is always subject to time, ever changing. Parinama. After, let me just see how many verses there are, because I want to end. Oh, 23. Oh, we're almost there. Oh, we're perfect. We'll be on perfect time. And then we turn to Lakshmi for our kirtan. Hopefully he's with us. After we have first venerated the adorable God, displaying every form, the source of all beings, is residing within one's heart. See, God does reside in the heart along with the Ātman. And that's, I think, the only way of reading all of those verses that go between the Ātman and God and being within. Well, they're both within. And then recognizing him as the one who bestows righteousness and removes evil, as the Lord of prosperity, as abiding within ourselves, abiding within the Ātman. Different from it, as the immortal residing in all beings. We will find this highest great Lord among lords, the highest God among gods, the highest master among masters, the God beyond the highest, as the adorable Lord of the universe. That could be like a Christian psalm. You know the Psalms? They sound a bit like that. One cannot find him in either an obligation to act or an organ with which to act. You're not going to get him in the, through rituals or vows or in some sensory way. Neither can one see anyone equal to him, let alone someone who surpasses him. One hears about his highest and truly diverse power, which is part of his very nature. Diverse powers, different shaktis, and is the working of his knowledge and strength. There is no one in the world who is his master, nor anyone who rules over him. He has no distinguishing mark. He is the cause, the overlord, over the overlords of the sense, or these are the celestials. In Indian tradition, our senses are actually controlled by celestials, and he is neither parent nor overlord. The one God who covers himself with things issuing from the primal source is covered. He's transcendent. From his own, remember the metaphor of the spider with the threads, which Ramanuja likes. Creation is like the spider with the threads. May he procure us dissolution in Brahman, right? If that's what you want, be dissolved into Brahman, you can get that. The one God hidden in all beings, pervading the universe, the inner self of all beings, the overseer of work, dwelling in all beings. So it just goes on like this. This is really, 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 I mean, repetition is pedagogy, really driving home the point. Shveta is really feels the need to make a major mark on the intellectual landscape of its day, an intellectual place, a scriptural place for monotheism. Because the previous Upanishads were, they were references to here and there to God, but mostly it was all about Ātman. The control of the many, The wise who perceive him as abiding within themselves, they alone, not others, enjoy eternal happiness. All the same language, changes among the changing, When a man knows that cause, here, how'd you know it? Which is to be comprehended through the application of Sankhya. Exactly what the Sankhya-karikas say. You have to know the difference between the Purusha and the Vyakta and the Avyakta. The difference between Purusha and property. Then he's freed from fetters. There the sun does not shine. This is right. I think this is verbatim Gita, or Gita is verbatim this, depending on who borrows from whom. There the sun does not shine, nor the moon and stars. There lightning does not shine. Of this common fire need we speak? If there's no sun, then no need for the sun. It's so luminous, meaning so luminous that the sun is insignificant. What to speak of the fire? This whole world radiates with his light. We had that, remember previously. He's the one goose. Remember the goose. Only when a man knows him does he pass beyond death. There is no other path to getting there. Again, that repetition. The creator of all, knower of all, knower, architect of time, one without qualities, without the gunas, beyond the gunas. One with all knowledge, Lord of both the primal source and of individual souls. Distinction. Lord of Prakriti and the souls. The Triad. The ruler over the qualities of the gunas. And the cause of liberation from remaining within and bondage. In other words, being in samsara in any sort of way. He who is one with him, immortal, abiding as the Lord, the knower, there is no other cause to becoming the Lord. Who at first created the Brahman and delivered to him the Vedas. This is probably Hiranyagarbha, the Brahman that received the Vedas from Ishvara. The little creator God, the four heads, Brahma, the long A. In that God do I, desires of liberation, seek refuge. And notice there's no bhakti here, as the later Krishna traditions are going to say. Approaching God for liberation is a kind of a lower type of bhakti. It's jnana mishrita bhakti. It's bhakti. You notice there's no talk here about love. There's fear, there's awe, there's glorification. It's almost kind of like flattery to get liberation. And that's the Ishvara of Patanjali. Because you fix your mind on Ishvara, so it's the support of the mind. Okay, he's beyond karma, he's omniscient, he's the guru of the ancients, he's not affected by klesha and karma. And what's all that got to do with chitta vritti nirodha? Well, he comes as Om. And what's that got to do with it? Well, then tajapa, you fix the mind on the repetition of Om. And then later on he says, if you do that, Ishvara Pranidhana and Samadhi sit here. So the Krishna traditions and the Vaishnavas say that's not bhakti. It's bhakti, but it's a gimme bhakti. It's just that you're asking for a very high level thing. You're asking for an Ātman, so it's better than asking for victory over enemies or something, or progeny or spouse or some material thing. But it's still not. It's not bhakti. It's not love of God. It's not love. Business. It's all glorification. And that's why I'd like to do, if we do another workshop, my friends, I want to do it on bhakti as love, not as gimme. And again, if you're interested, I did get some emails, but if you are interested in February, a workshop on bhakti, and I'd like to read a 16th century text with you, written by Rupa Goswami, the Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu, the ocean of the nectar of bhakti, which is about bhakti as love and the different types of love and stages of love. No gimme. No gimme. In fact, the first verse of the Bhagavata Purana, 18,000 verses, says, this Purana is free from all cheating religion, Kaitava Dharma. Cheating. What's cheating? I'm worshiping you, but I want something. It's kind of cheating. I'm flattering you. Oh, you're the greatest. You're God. Oh, you're the one. All of this stuff we've been reading. And then at the end, what? Oh, give me liberation. Better than asking, give me my daily bread, or give me my, a husband or a wife, to be sure. But the text we will read, if we do a workshop in February, my friends, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, will be about, right from the start, no cheating, no asking God for anything, approaching God, striving to love God for God, not for anything. Let's have a look. Let's see what that looks like. If you're interested, join. Drop me a line. Join me. Otherwise, I read it all by myself. In him, well, where are we? Only when people will be able to roll, I don't understand what this means, will be able to roll up the sky like a piece of leather, and there's no footnote here, but it must mean something like transcending matter, but it's not clear to me what the reference is. Will suffering come to an end without first knowing? Right. Okay, now it's ending. Right on time. By the power of his tapas and the grace of God, the wise Śvetāśvatara, so that's the white horse, it's the name of somebody, first came to know Brahman and then proclaimed it to those who had passed beyond their order of life, whether you're a householder or a renunciate, gone beyond all of those identification with the body in its various stages. Okay, now I'm brahmachari, now I'm a grihasta, now I'm a householder, now I'm a renunciate. They've gone beyond all that. As the highest means of purification that brings delight to the company of seers. The seers, the rishis, they love this stuff, they live for it. Perhaps some of us also do. Some of you perhaps also do. So that brings delight. This supreme secret was proclaimed during a former age in the Vedanta. Notice how the Upanishads are called the Vedanta. The Vedanta Sutras are not making up a new name. They're taking the name of the Upanishads from the Upanishads. A former age in the Vedanta. One should never disclose it to a person who is not of a tranquil disposition, sattvic, or who is not one's son or pupil. So there you have the old guru system. You disclose this to someone who's really sincere. Your family. There's family lineages and then disciplic lineages. Now here, finally, the first time we see the word love. Only in a man who has the deepest love for God. It's the first time we found in this entire Upanishads. What the text I propose we read would be nothing other than love. It would be love all over the place, and no talk about Ātman even. No talk about realizing the Ātman. No interest. No, we want God. What's God? What is that Ātman? Paramatma. That Ātman known as Bhagavan. What kind of a relationship can the Ātman have with Bhagavan that's freed from anything to do with this world and gimme things in this world? What does that look like? What does a liberated Ātman's relationship with Bhagavan look like? That's what I propose we explore in our next Svadhyaya. Only the man, Lakshmi, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'm just finishing up here. Last verse. Only in a man who has the deepest love for God. Do you mind? I want to see, you know what? I want to see what the word for love is. Give me a second. I'm just going to pull out my Sanskrit Upanishads. Is it, I don't think it's, let's see what it is. Because it's the first time we see it in this Upanishad, and I'm not suspicious, I'm just curious. What is the actual word in the Sanskrit? There we are. I speak fat Upanishads with the Sanskrit on the left, English on the right. What is the word that is given? Oh, it's bhakti. It's bhakti. Yasya devi para bhakti. So this is a famous verse. Yata devi tata guru. And usually, for those who are promoting guru, they like this verse. So, because it's, look, only a man who has the deepest love for God and who shows the same love towards his guru as towards God. So we have this sense of, understood in different ways. In Advaita Vedanta, the guru is God. In the Vaishnava dualistic tradition, no, teacher's not God. but only through the guru can you get to God. So the guru plays a very essential role. But as I've told you so many times, my friends, don't go running around looking for a guru. Surrender to Ishvara, let Ishvara make those kinds of arrangements, otherwise you get cheated. Because of the power, because of this powerful relationship. In our day and age, wherever there's power, there's going to be people that will jump on it to exploit. And that's very much the case with this whole guru business. So you've heard me say it before, and I just say it from my experience, my bitter experience in my own life and my observation of how things go terribly wrong when the teacher is absorbed in ego. So, but here it is. We're reading Upanishads. Only a man who has the deepest love for God in it, the word bhakti is the word, and who shows the same love towards his teacher as towards God, to these points, declared by the noble one, that's Kapila, shine forth. Okay, so we have 4 minutes. We'll take a question. About one question.
Can I ask a question, Edwin?
Yes.
I was confused about the threefold Brahman, the concept of God, self, and Prakriti. So, to use an analogy, is Brahman like cheese that pervades the pizza, or is Brahman the pizza that is cut into three of God, self, and Prakriti?
It's well, there's different ways that's going to be envisioned, and the different Vedanta schools have different ways of answering that question, and reflected in their philosophy. So Ramanuja's Vishishta Advaita, differentiated non-dualism. Madhva is Dvaita, then there's Bheda, then there's Dvaita Dvaita. So all of the Vedanta traditions are going to have nuances on that. But what the common denominator is, on the one hand, you want to say everything is God. But on the other hand, you don't want that to just dissolve into an impersonal oneness, a Brahman impersonal oneness. You want to say that although everything is God, there are differences within the oneness of everything. And the difference is that there is God, the supreme being, that is the support of everything else. And it's not the pizza cut in three. It's more like, the pizza maker who made the pizza. I'm not quite sure that works well, but it'd be closer to that. So there is the support of it all, the creator of it all, the sustainer of it all, and what's being sustained on the one hand, inert, achit matter, and on the other hand, the plurality of Ātmans. So therefore, there's a triad in it that the Śvetāśvatara started off. So, but you don't want to say, except for one Vedanta in Madhva, who's a hardcore dualist, there's another dualism that matter is co-eternal with God. There's a distinction between God and matter and God and the souls, and he has these Vedas, the five differences, the difference between one soul and another, between one atom and another, between the soul and the atom, and between God and the soul, and between God and matter. So he has these five Vedas. His dualism is much more. It's really, you know what it is? It's in your face Shankara. He really is, his whole, so much of his philosophizing is directed against, because Shankara and Advaita had become so dominant. But for the most part, the other Vaishnava traditions are not so stringently Advaita. They're going to talk about sort of oneness, right? So Ramanuja's is Vishishta Advaita, keeps the Advaita, but Vishishta, there's differences in it. But those differences are not equal like three pieces of pizza. They're not equal. Bhagavan is the supreme and the sustainer of the others. The others are sustained by Bhagavan, but Bhagavan is not sustained by them. So a bit like the sun and the light, well, which one's sustaining who? Which one's emanating from who? Well, in one sense, they're the same, but clearly the sun is the emanator and the sustainer of the light. So that's a nice metaphor that's often used. So, is that dualism? I mean, we can use that term loosely, but really it's non-dualism in dualism, or dualism in non-dualism. And I know that sounds all, scholastic, but there's a reason for coming up with this precise terminology, especially if what the Vaishnavas don't accept about Shankar, here's what they don't accept. If you want to say the world is illusory, who cares? No one's going to debate. You might debate a few metaphysicians will debate that. Fine. Who cares? If you want to say the Ātman, it merges into Brahman, who cares? Because everyone accepts that the Ātman can, absorbed in its own nature, it can be infinite and all-pervading. The Vaishnavas accept that possibility. That's not the problem. You can say the creation is illusory. Okay, Vaishnavas will say it's not illusory, it's temporary and ever-changing, but no big deal. But you're going to say that Ishvara is illusion? That's a no-no. And that's the line in the sand. And that's why your beloved Ishvara that you adore and dedicate your life to, and someone comes up and say, oh yeah, well, Ishvara is okay, in the conventional illusory, then that's when the theologians come out guns blazing. It's because of that. The other aspects of Advaita Vedanta are not really important. If you say the world is illusory or ever-changing, not a great deal of difference. In a sense, if it's ever-changing, it is sort of illusory because there's that tree out there in 100 years won't be there. So in that sense, you could say, not a big difference. And everyone agrees that the Ātman can actually experience a state of infinite or pervadingness, if that's what it chooses. Vaishnavas accept that. But don't you come saying, our Ishvara is Maya. That's Mayavad. And that's the term Mayavad. Those who are Mayavad, it's different from being a Brahmavad. That's different from saying, it's different from saying, okay, the goal of life is to seek the Ātman. Vaishnavas will say, well, good luck. It's fine. You're an Ātman. If you choose to seek that, no problem at all. If that's your goal, go ahead. It's noble. It's very, it's a high, noble goal to realize your own Ātman. No problem. That's your, and that's very respect-worthy. But don't be coming telling us our Ishvara is Maya, because then you're going to have a theological confrontation.
Ishvara meaning Saguna Brahman. Right?
Saguna Brahman, yeah, which for the Vaishnavas is the highest. Higher than Nirguna, which is the Ātman. When the Ātman is Svarupe Vastanan, absorbed in its own nature, it's Nirguna. There are no qualities. Vaishnavas, Brahman has this other possibility of form and qualities and personalities and leelas. There's infinite variegatedness within Brahman, but that's only attainable through bhakti. If you don't want that, fine, then go for Nirguna Brahman, but then don't tell a Vaishnava that Ishvara is Maya. That is where the polemics and someone like Madhava very, very, very strongly reacts. That's the line in the sand. The rest of it doesn't matter. Who cares? World, real, unreal, who cares? You want to be infinite, you can. Nirguna, go for it. Good luck, God bless. But don't be dissing our Ishvara. Yeah. Any other questions? And Lakshmi Ji.
Yes.
My good friend Lakshmi Ji.
Haribo.
Haribo. Thank you so much. And there we are. Thank you, Lakshmi. Everybody knows you. I don't think I need to introduce you again.
No introduction. No introduction necessary.
If we do another Svadhyaya in February on the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, in addition to chanting, perhaps you would like to conduct a session one of the times if we do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Whatever you would like.
So over to you.
Now I just want to get make sure the sound is not breaking up.
It sounds good so far.
It's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey Govinda, hey Gopal, Keshavam Madhavam Dinadaya. Hey Govinda, hey Gopal, Keshavam Madhavam Dinadaya. Hey Govinda, Hey Gopal, Keshava Madhava, Dina Daya. 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 Dina Daya, Prabhu, Dina Daya. Dina Daya, Prabhu, Dina Daya. Keshava Madhava, Dina Daya. Keshava Madhava, Dina Daya. Dina Daya, Prabhu, Dina Daya. Dina Daya, Prabhu, Dina Daya. Keshava Madhava, Dina Daya. Keshava Madhava, Dina Daya. Hey Govinda, Hey Gopal, 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 Keshava Madhava, Dina Daya. Dina Daya, Prabhu, Dina Daya. Dina Daya, Prabhu, Dina Daya. Keshava Madhava, Dina Daya. Keshava Madhava, Dina Daya. Hey Govinda, Hey Gopal, Keshava Madhava, Dina Daya. Hey Govinda, Hey Gopal, Keshava Madhava, Dina Daya. 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 Hey Govinda, Hey Gopal, Keshava Madhava, Dina Daya. Hey Govinda, Hey Gopal, Keshava Madhava, Dina Daya. Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Dinadayal Prabhu Dinadayal. Dinadayal Prabhu Dinadayal. Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Hey Govinda, hey Gopal, 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 Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Dinadayal Prabhu Dinadayal. Dinadayal Prabhu Dinadayal. Dinadayal Prabhu Dinadayal. Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Hey Govinda, hey Gopal, Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Hey Govinda, hey Gopal, Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Hey Govinda, hey Govinda, hey Govinda, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda. Hey Govinda, hey Gopal, Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Hey Govinda, hey Gopal, Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Dinadayal Prabhu Dinadayal. Dinadayal Prabhu Dinadayal. Dinadayal Prabhu Dinadayal. Hey Govinda, hey Gopala, hey Govinda, hey Gopala, hey Govinda, hey Gopala, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda. Hey Govinda, hey Gopal, Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Hey Govinda, hey Gopal, Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Dinadayal Prabhu Dinadayal. Dinadayal Prabhu Dinadayal. Dinadayal Prabhu Dinadayal. Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Keshava Madhava Dinadayal. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Hey Govinda Hey Gopal Hey Govinda Hey Gopal Radhe Govinda Radhe Gopal Radhe Govinda Radhe Gopal Radhe 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 Jai Jai Sri Radhe Jai Jai Sri Radhe Jai Jai Sri Radhe Jai Jai Sri Radhe Sham Gaura Pramanandi.
Thank you so much, Lakshmi.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And that's it. That ends our course in the Upanishads. So it's so nice to end on that beautiful heart, place of the heart, with Govinda. So do send me an email again if you're interested, just so I know there's enough people. We'll look at this. We'll discuss what's the difference between the bliss of the Ātman and love of God, and that will be, there's a lot of this sort of Yoga Sutras and some, Vedānta talks about the bliss of the Ātman. What's the difference between that and pure love of God? Pure meaning not mixed with any gimme sort of demand, even the demand for liberation. What does that look like? And if you're interested in that, send me an email, and we'll invite Lakshmi to join us for Kirtan. Otherwise, have a great holiday, everybody. Thank you for sharing your Sangha. This is our nourishment. This is what we live for. This is what is meaningful to us. And have a great season. And I'll maybe be in touch sometime in February if we go ahead with this. Lakshmi, thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you all for your Sangha. Greatly appreciate it.
Jai Sri Radhe.
Jai Sri Radhe.
Okay.